Well, good morning and welcome to one of those great things we can only do thanks to our new adoption of technology, and that's actually to have guests from around the world. And today we're delighted to have Peter Oakes, who's the founder of Fintech Ireland, dialing in from Dublin. Peter's here to talk about Ireland, a model for fintech collaboration. Now, whilst Ireland is clearly a model for fintech collaboration around the world, there'll be a little bit of an emphasis, I think, today, particularly given Brexit and a number of other things on fintech collaboration between the UK and Ireland. But we are looking globally, so please don't let it get too parochial. And as many of you will know, I'm Michael Mainelli. I'm one of the directors of Zien, and it really is a privilege to introduce these many events that we're able to hold, principally because our sponsors, who range widely and freely across technology, economics, and finance, have equally wide interests. I myself have a particularly wide interest that encompass Ireland, being not just an Irish citizen, but also for 4 years I was the Taoiseach's advisor on financial services and growing the industry there, and in fact the creation of the International Financial Forum in Ireland back in the 2010s. So I believe fervently, as does Peter Oakes, in our ability to work better together, in fact, to do amazing things together. And we'll be covering that in today's presentation. Now, the format, as ever, is my job is to get out of the way as quickly as possible because we're here to hear from our expert, Peter. But 3 points of housekeeping, if I may. Yes, these slides will be made available. Two, yes, this is being recorded, and the recording will go up in approximately 2 working days, so count on it about midday on Friday. But 3, how do you participate? Well, the whole purpose of these is to really get engaged with our speakers and our experts, and you type your questions into the GoToWebinar question and answer facility, which has certain advantages. One is I'm watching it very carefully, and I'll feed those into a conversation with Peter. But that means I am not answering emails or on Signal or WhatsApp or WeChat or whatever your favorite thing is. I'm here with you, so feed them in. Second thing is that Peter will get every one of your questions, comments, observations, links to an article you feel he or I ought to see, and we will make sure that Peter gets every last one of those with your email attached so he can respond directly to you. We have quite a few people online today, and we are also hoping to have, therefore, a very deep conversation, but we also have a poll as well. So fingers on buzzers and be ready. But with enough of the housekeeping, oh yes, let's open with that poll then, shall we? So does your company or fintech, I'm not sure that they're different things, but does your company look at Ireland as a regulatory location or as an outsourcing location? So we're just getting those responses in on the poll. As ever, Peter, the audience here is quite opinionated, or at least knows its own mind. Well over half the audience have voted. We'll just keep it open for a split second more, and let's present those results. So regulatory is 50%, both outsourcing and regulatory 25%, and a mix of 3 others, leaving us a percentage point down in the rounding errors. So regulatory there as well. Interestingly for me, Peter, it's not just the outsourcing, but it's also, of course, the development capability, which I know you'll be touching on. So with no more ado then, Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michael. Just going to start the software here to show my screen, and is my screen there showing of the first slide?
We can see it clearly.
We have a great plus there. Okay, well, thank you very much. So just forgive me, folk. I've got 3 screens opened here, and I'm managing like I'm a stock trader. Thanks very much for the invitation to be here today. Delighted. I've known Michael for a good number of years, and particularly passionate about the collaboration model between Ireland, the UK, and actually Ireland's collaboration model much further afield. I do work a lot in the United Kingdom, and I will just flip through some slides here, and we'll venture through those. So Michael's already mentioned that the slides will be made available to the attendees. Just by way of background, I'll be very quick here. It's a short presentation, and the time really is the audience's time here for Q&As. Just to give you my background and my interest in fintech, I now work as a non-executive director of a number of regulated fintechs. In the Republic of Ireland, the regulator actually has a requirement and it will not authorise companies anymore unless they appoint independent non-executive directors. So I'm now involved in that space. I sit on the board of a business called Susquehanna, TransferMate, which I might talk a little bit later on during the presentation, Optal, and Abbey Wealth. They're all regulated by the Financial Services Authority, and our Financial Service Authority being the Central Bank of Ireland's. Susquehanna and Optal started in overseas. They weren't born in Ireland, and so too Abbey Wealth, but TransferMate's Indigenous. I do a bit of work, obviously, with Fintech Ireland. It's a free network. It's not a paid service. I have a couple of consultancy firms, and I also work with a UK law firm which was born in the States on fintech matters. So it is really heavily around fintech and regtech, and predominantly at the intersection of fintech and regulation, which has taken me recently into the dreaded field of crypto assets. And I say dreaded with my tongue in cheek, just given some of the hot news that maybe we might even discuss today, Michael. So a little bit about fintech ecosystem in Ireland, because otherwise the collaboration discussion is meaningless. At Fintech Ireland, we're tracking over 700 companies that tell us that they are fintech. And when I say they tell us they're fintech, sometimes I've checked and it's nothing more than two boys in a PowerPoint slide working out of a garage. So they haven't quite got to the first product level. However, we look at that information, we distill it down, and we're now tracking 386 Indigenous and international fintechs that operate in and from Ireland. That number's probably higher now. And next year, when we release the next edition of the map, that'll explain why. We've surveyed over 320 companies in Ireland, and they tell us lots of information, including information about their funding requirements, diversity on the board, and their top 5 challenges. We have about 2,700 to the Fintech Ireland network email service run by MailChimp. And we have a big social media presence, over 4,000 of our company page, over 2,500 in the group, and nearly 6,000 Twitter followers, about 160,000 visits a year to the website. And we've participated at least in 100 events and probably spoken in front of audiences totaling about 10,500 people. So we really do have a deep connection into the fintech ecosystem in Ireland. That's just some of the examples of some of the things we've been discussing. And most recently, we did a discussion actually on central bank digital currencies. But again, as a lot of the things that I do is involved in regulation, you'll find a common theme through Fintech Ireland is around fintech that requires regulation. So here's some facts and figures for Ireland. Ireland, we have a common law system, and surprise, surprise, so does the United Kingdom and a number of other countries. Ireland also offers an international dispute resolution offering. Sorry, forgive me for that. I'll fix that in the typo, saying the word offer twice. And we also have an Ireland for Law initiative. We're an English first business language country. We're considered to be business friendly, as ranked by the World Bank. We're number 24, but the United Kingdom is at a higher rate of number 8. And we exist in the common travel area along with the UK. And I don't think we talk enough about that between Ireland and the UK for the free movement of human capital. So that continues despite Brexit because it existed before Brexit. Now, the state of the finserv, the wider finserv ecosystem in Ireland, there's about 10,000 regulated firms in the Republic of Ireland. There's about 264 Indigenous fintechs and 122 international fintechs. I think those last two numbers will go up by at least 10 to 15% when I release the maps next year. And we have 68 regulatory technology firms here. We're one of the largest exporters of financial services from the European Union. A massive funds industry in Ireland with almost 4 trillion of funds domiciled in Ireland. In our workforce, 52,000 people are employed directly in international finserv in the Republic of Ireland. We have a new employment target of adding another 5,000 jobs to that figure. But away from the International Financial Services Centre, we also employ around 50,000 people in the Indigenous financial services sector. So think about a local insurance company or a local insurance broker. And in addition to that, we have over 105,000 people work in technology. Now, obviously, there's been a bit of a blip there recently because of the headwinds, which we'll talk about later. And we're home to 20 of the world's top 25 financial services firms. One of the things I strongly believe in is a presence in the UK and a presence in Ireland can give you the full European regulated coverage a business requires. But we also have to be very mindful about something called regulatory divergence between the UK and Europe, and Ireland will be caught in the middle of that for a number of reasons. Now, this is just a map of the indigenous fintech companies sitting in Ireland. And as you will see, we've broken them down into there's 12 categories there. One is credit and lending, platforms, funds and trading, crypto. But I'm going to focus at the moment on payments. You'll see the payments box there and you'll see regtech. So straight away, the visual is the payments sector is the largest fintech sector in the Republic of Ireland, followed closely by regulatory technology. Our insurtech market isn't as big as it may be in other jurisdictions, but it is scaling. In terms of crypto, we probably don't have the indigenous crypto market as strong as many other jurisdictions, including the UK. But I think that depiction gives you an idea of where our Irish fintechs are focused. What you're not going to see on this map is, of course, the word banking. Ireland doesn't have any native digital banks. We don't have any Starling banks. We don't have any Revolut banks that have set up and have their headquarters in Ireland. So we'll see those international banks on the next slide. So hopefully when you look at that, that will give you a good idea of what's going on. But again, it's heavily bent towards payments. And I'll just make a point that just because you work in payments doesn't mean that your business has to be regulated. So there's probably about 46 payments companies there. I'm just going to check on my other slides, 58 actually on that payment slide. But actually, there's only 45 regulated firms doing payments in Ireland, and we can explain that later on. Now, the international map came about because my colleague at Fintech Ireland, Peter O'Halloran, said we're ignoring a big chunk of the market if we don't talk about the international fintech because that creates the collaboration model. And so again, we've put them into roughly the same categories. Although we don't have a category for banks, you can clearly see that we have KBC, which unfortunately is leaving Ireland, but Danske Bank, Citibank, Starling Bank, although Starling Bank has announced now that it's not going to proceed for a license in Ireland. However, we do have Bank BUNQ, which is advancing its entry into the Irish market. Under funds and trading, you'll find a lot of firms there involved in MiFID type services or investment services directive type activities. But again, payments is still a big area. But what's interesting for us in Ireland in terms of the international fintech setting up is we seem to be attracting a lot of crypto and, importantly, blockchain and DLT firms. So I think we're going to see that portion of that become a lot faster, a lot quicker on the international map than we will see actually in the other sectors for the indigenous map. I've just cut out the regtech as a general map here. I won't stop to talk about it because I've covered regtech, but Ireland does have a reputation for governance, risk and compliance. And in fact, Bank of America has its legal and compliance centres of excellence here in the Republic of Ireland, although they have, of course, their equity and fixed interest trading in other jurisdictions. Ireland, in terms of regulated financial services, we're not as strong here in fintech as you would be in the UK. So we have only roughly about 44, 45 regulated payments and regulated electronic money firms compared to the many hundreds you have in the UK. In terms of crypto, I just thought I'd put this up for just a point of discussion. In the United Kingdom, my last tally is that there are 39 registered crypto asset firms in the UK. In Ireland, we only have 2. Those 2 being Gemini and the other one being Zodia. And you'll see both Gemini and Zodia on the UK map. So there's probably an area there for collaboration for Ireland to glean from the UK what it's doing in this space and what we can do further in Ireland. Moving quite quickly along here, just to talk about funding, we can get into this in the Q&As. Venture capital funding in Ireland, especially for Irish SMEs, did increase by 34%. If you jump down a little bit below, you'll see in yellow, I've called out cybersecurity and fintech. They were the leading sectors in Q3 2022 for venture capital funding in Ireland. But overall, when you look at Irish fintechs, they've attracted about 260 million in transactions and investment in H1 2022. One of those deals is the deal for TransferMate. I sit on the board of TransferMate. We took in 70 million of funding and we got the fabled unicorn status. We're a global B2B payments business. Separate to that, the Irish government has established a 90 million euro Irish Innovation Seed Fund, which actually can be open to UK companies. We know the headlines about the UK overtaking New York, London overtaking New York and San Francisco for fintech funding. Globally, obviously, the picture also shows that fintech investment is dropping, and we can talk about that. But the problem about these statistics is that when you look around, you'll find people measuring them in different ways. So KPMG's figures in September 2022 look slightly different to CBI Insight's figures in July 2022, but they may just be a timing difference. So as I'm wrapping up the slides here, just to quickly say, Ireland and UK are winning proposition for international fintech. So I'm not excluding other jurisdictions. I'm just pointing out the UK for this particular presentation, but I could actually make this slide for Ireland, the US, Ireland and Australia. But I think what's really important is this incredible advantage, as I mentioned, from the similarities between Ireland and the UK earlier. First of all, the fintech bridges. We've been pretty strong at Fintech Ireland about trying to do events in the UK and having UK companies doing events here in Ireland. There's a wonderful opportunity for what we call the triangle, the UK mainland, Northern Ireland and Ireland. Ireland provides an opportunity for regulated firms setting up here to access 447 million Europeans via passportable services. You can do it across the whole of the EEA. You think about the UK, it provides access to talent, capital, and it's a leading international fintech reputation. Population of 67.3 million people. There's opportunities for Irish fintech to access the funding in the UK, and it's joined up thinking and blueprint for fintech. And I'll come back to that in just a second. What do I mean by joined up? There are opportunities for UK fintech to avail of Ireland as their European Union HQ, and also avail of Ireland's innovation clusters. So if you're an Asian, North American, South American, Latin American, African, Australian, New Zealand firm, and you wish to enter and provide regulated services to the continent of Europe, you have to be in the UK and Europe. And to me, that is the proposition for collaboration. And just to say, my last few observations are that we're seeing strong levels of growth in fintech, Michael. We've got the ability to provide the support services. We mentioned outsourcing at the start. Just to point out that just like the United Kingdom, not every fintech must be regulated or registered. In Ireland, 45 fintechs to provide payments and e-money. We have 4 registered open banking firms, but we only have just two registered crypto asset firms. Of course, many hundreds of firms can passport into Ireland under the EU passporting mechanism. And we probably have about 90 fintechs that don't require authorization, which operate from Ireland, and they're involved in escrow as a service and payment gateways. But of course, there are headwinds. We're in a higher inflationary environment, a higher interest rate environment. We're seeing funding drops, and we're seeing tech and fintech layoffs in Ireland as we are in the rest of the world. The last couple of observations, I really want to talk about these in terms of opportunities and challenges. I think for Ireland, there's an opportunity for us to expand our embedded finance and insurtech offering. In terms of investment services, we've got to focus more upon what technology can do in the area of ESG. Regtech's obviously a great one still for Ireland. Blockchain is. And I say note the ASX issue recently, where the Australian Stock Exchange probably didn't product manage its blockchain exercise properly, and that has now imploded. It doesn't seem to be a problem with blockchain, more the project management. When it comes to digital assets, I think the model now really is yes to digital assets, but not really the promotion of speculative crypto coins or speculative tokens. I think we need to improve the regulatory framework narrative in Ireland to attract more business. We need to grow more local talent in order to scale globally. And we've got to be mindful of regulatory divergence. I think a big opportunity for Ireland is understanding what more can happen through the Khalifa review of the UK fintech ecosystem and Ireland's sort of equivalent strategy, but not really, Ireland for finance strategy. And of course, that collaboration question. In terms of challenges, I think the big challenge is losing sight of the fact that a robust, fair, and transparent regulatory framework is a benefit. And I think that's the same in the UK when there's a lot of attack of regulators. People seem to forget that actually having strong regulation is something which attracts good quality firms to your jurisdiction. We're in a competitive landscape. Like the UK, we can't lose sight of promoting the regions. Not everything happens in Dublin. We have many other fine regions. Same with the UK and London. I think the problem we have is paying lip service to diversity and inclusiveness. I think a lot of us are getting consultation fatigue. How many more times can we reply to what seems to be the same consultation on the same points, but with a slight variance? Regulatory divergence, funding, and I think underestimating the impact of ESG. And just my last word is on why FinTech UK. Why did we set that up? It exists as a tool for all FinTech doing business from or in the UK, but it really started with the idea of reinforcing the UK and Ireland FinTech bridge following Brexit. And it aligns with some of the work I do with the law firm Armstrong Teasdale in London. Michael, that was the whistle stop tour. I hope I came in under the 20 minutes.
That was absolutely perfect, Peter. Spot on. And in fact, time for a few questions. In fact, would you mind just flipping back 2 slides to the one where you actually had the opportunities and the advanced, the observations? I thought that was a particularly good summary of some detail and might prompt a number of questions. I've got a couple of questions already here, but if I may use Chairman's prerogative and just open briefly. You mentioned the issues to do with crypto and that Ireland is light in crypto. Do you see that as an advantage?
Well, at the moment, I don't see it as a disadvantage because, certainly none of the big names that have come undone are here in Ireland. And Michael, as you will know, that many people will remember, Ireland's reputation coming out of 2008, 2009, going into that financial crisis wasn't great with the way that we regulated. And there was a criticism of our regulator in what's called the Honohan report. So what was seen as a regulator, which is probably considered to be slightly more conservative. Now, having said there's only two, Michael, is actually, and I've heard this now a number of times, and when I've done the tallies of the firms that have contacted me, I'm pretty sure this figure's right. There's around about 50 to 60 crypto asset firms applying for authorization in the Republic of Ireland. And right now, that would have to be roughly the case because there's no passporting of crypto services, and that won't happen until MiCA. So if you really want to offer a pan-European crypto service, you actually have to be registered in every member state. Now, is it a disadvantage for all at the moment? No, I think there's a lot of development going on blockchain. We have Blockchain Ireland as well. We have a number of the innovation hubs that are attracting US firms that are doing a lot of their blockchain development out of Ireland. And again, so that's that differential between, okay, it's blockchain, it's not necessarily crypto. In terms of crypto, I think where Ireland probably will try and steal the march will be around digital assets. And what I mean by that is, if we think about the 4 trillion in funds in Ireland, a lot of those funds companies now want a sitting to demand from their investors, and they want to hold digital assets, but the current custodians aren't set up for that. So I'm going to stop there. So I think digital assets is a big play for Ireland.
Yeah, and of course I've always maintained that digital assets isn't really anything new. It's what we've been doing for 45 years anyway. So a token is really just a database entry, and I don't know why it's all wrapped up. Personally, I think that the Irish approach has been prudent. Again, as you say, perhaps forced on it by the crisis of 2008-9 that arose. But some of it too is also due to structure, isn't it? So the position of the Central Bank of Ireland in this regulatory regime has had a big impact on the way that the tech sector has developed and the financial sector. Would you like to make any comments about how the Irish regulatory system differs from both the UK and the European? Well, sorry, the UK and other European countries.
No, absolutely. So, look, I mean, the first starting point is that we have a unitary central bank and regulator. So the central bank and the financial regulator are the same organisation now. 10 years ago, there was this sort of, one was one and one was a constituent element of the other one, and it all got very confusing. And that was one of the reasons why, in one of the reports that was after the crisis, they sort of said we should have a unitary regulator. So we have that. So our central bank is the equivalent of the Bank of England, the PRA, and the FCA combined. And that unitary model is similar in some other jurisdictions, and there are other jurisdictions like Australia where you have a reserve bank, you have a prudential authority, and you also have a conduct authority. What does that mean? It sort of means that the regulator can have a look at risk all the way across the board, from regulation through to central banking.
Yep.
You asked me about tech, the tech side of things there, Michael. I guess separate to the central bank, Ireland for the last 20, 30 years has been home to a number of significant technology companies. One of them would be Microsoft. There's been some of those companies which have moved on, they've closed down, they've let people go, and they've rebuilt their business. What this actually allowed to happen in Ireland are senior executives to leave those organisations and then set up their own business. So we have a number of examples of financial technology and tech companies in Ireland that were born out of problems at international fintech companies here in Ireland. So they've actually become what would you call that? The embryonic ground, I guess, to grow a lot of indigenous fintechs from the benefit of those companies being in Ireland. And why were those companies in Ireland? We can go back to the old days, and you can say it was around tax, but we'd argue it was access to talent. But it's a separate discussion.
Okay. I've got a question here from Hugh Purser. Do you have any comments on the future of the passporting relationship between the UK and the EU?
We see at the moment, Brexit meant Brexit, didn't it? That was the view from the EU, and that was the view from the UK. And that's the point about regulatory divergence. So there may be circumstances where the United Kingdom might be considered to be a third country and be able to get certain benefit of the EU legislation, but because it's outside the European Union, it no longer has that. But that also goes in the other direction. If you're a regulated fintech or any financial services company in Ireland and you used to passport into the UK, you now have to, if you're not already in the temporary permission regime, it's probably too late for you, but that leads you to form or take your own license in the UK to have your own presence, because you can't passport any longer except on a temporary permission regime. So, this is a challenge now, having left Brexit, is how do I continue to grow my business across Europe in a compliant manner in the absence of the passporting window, yeah.
Okay. Now, also another question from Hugh Purser. What are the survivor ratios in Irish fintech today? So maybe expresses, what proportion of fintech survive through 1, 3, 5 years? Are the great majority of these do they fold? Is there a tradition of the being acquired by legacy financial institutions? And of course, you've been on this scene for a long time, so you've got quite a good perspective on this.
Yeah, we're seeing companies like Stripe buy out Irish fintech companies. Those companies weren't necessarily struggling, but one was TouchTech, I think it was Touch Payments, they acquired. And we see quite a lot of that happening. I think the problem here, or not the problem, the challenge here is that hear the success stories. When things don't go well, you often don't see that reported in the media because no one's going to be promoting to the journalists, something didn't work out. But they'll certainly promote, hey, we just raised 10 million and we're now valued at 300 million. And that will hit headlines. And with great respect, the politicians and others will all go along for those photo shoots, and that engenders the news feed there on Google. So you get to see that. I think in terms of the cycle, Look, there certainly have been collapses of fintechs in Ireland. We certainly haven't seen them at a level of scale or at a level where there's been a systemic impact on the jurisdiction, or b an impact on the consumers. I've seen a number of smaller fintechs just run out of runway. That they did their best to push the idea forward, but there just wasn't a market appetite. I talked to the accelerators and the hubs in Ireland, which do a fantastic job. Startups, we have Scale Up Ireland, and I know they would have statistics on the scale ups. Um, I would guess probably, in any given year, of say 30 young fintech companies that come to me. And again, I'm going to start that with a definition of two people and their PowerPoint slide with a fintech idea. I would say around about 20% of them, I wouldn't expect to see them in 18 months. There's been a few that have invested a lot of money into their business during that course, and that's obviously been chewed up. Um, is that a loss, or is that or are they stripes of experience? But I would think that if you saw 10 good fintechs start today, I'd say over the next 3 years, you'd probably expect two to drop out, maybe three. And I expect by the time you get to year five, you may only see three of those 10 still in business in exactly the same form they were. But the difference could be those that have just closed, or they've sold their technology as opposed to the business to a third party because they were able to solve a problem that someone else wasn't, but they just couldn't scale and they couldn't get the funding. So the only asset they had was the IP to sell.
Mm, okay. Well, one of the things that I find interesting in slides to do with fintech, and please take this away, is that a lot of people
Please.
kind of say, "Oh, and insurtech," and they sort of throw it in whenever things are slow. Well, then fintech is going to grow outside of insurance. And a lot of the stuff in payments and banking has largely been finished. What's the materiality behind insurtech in Ireland? Could you give us an example of one or two insurtech firms that are doing something interesting?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Is the screen still showing, or are we locked on a screen somewhere?
No,
Because I have.
we can. Would you like to go back?
I'm trying to go back to a slide there with the maps, but when I look at one of my screens, it looks like I'm still on the get in touch page, but I am arrowing back to the maps. Can you?
Peter will move on that. Just hang on.
Okay, sure. If Peter can take us to the
There
international,
it is.
Peter can take us to that map there. So, thank you for that, Peter. So in the insurtech, the indigenous insurtech market, in terms of materiality, what you're going to see there is, in order to build this box out for the indigenous fintech map, we had to look at insurtech in a much wider sense, including like cyber risk firms that only focused on insurance, brokers like Beat the Bank, Charisma, which is a really interesting business there involved in mobility insurance, so a real fintech. Claim Vantage, incorporated here in Ireland, but doing a lot more of its business overseas in Asia. Majesco, it acquired another insurtech to be on the map. Fineos. Fineos is an Indigenous Irish fintech that actually is now listed on the Irish Stock Exchange. And then we have Relay Software, and we have Described Data. And Described Data probably could sit under another category and not necessarily insurtech. So in terms of the indigenous fintech market, it's probably skewed, the materiality point is probably skewed to Fineos, Fineos, because of its sheer market value by being listed on a stock exchange overseas as an indigenous Irish company. But if Peter could take us to the very next slide, the international fintech map, I think this will give us a better understanding of the interest in insurtech. Now, although it's still not very large, you have the likes of Liberty, Aon, Close Brothers, Allstate, Campion, and Unum here in Ireland. Now, we have insurance companies in Ireland that have insurtech, that are looking at insurtech initiatives. We didn't include them on this map because we wanted them to be more, designed as an insurtech, tech being at the heart of what they do. Um, so when a traditional insurance company sets something else up, and as they're trying to get it to scale, they'll eventually end up on the map. So I don't want people to think the map is showing 6 logos here means we don't have a strong insurtech industry, because again, it's all about the definition. What is the definition of fintech? It's such a broad church. Some people don't like it being including the word insurtech. They don't like it being inclusive of the word crypto. But in my mind, it's any technology that advances a financial service. And in my broad definition, I would include insurtech. But we simply just don't have we simply don't do as much in insurance in Ireland by the numbers as we would do in funds. But the smaller number we have in insurance are doing a lot of things. It's just that necessarily it's not always that easy to identify.
Okay. Another question on this map. While I'm at it, these maps, as you know, have become horrifically popular in all sorts of sectors, and I quite like them because they force you to group things and see the firm logos and whatnot. But if you had to pick one Irish initiative on this chart, just one, and say I've never seen this happening anywhere else, Singapore, London, New York, what might it be?
Okay, if you just take us back one slide, I think slide number 7, the Indigenous map. If you're still there, but
Yep, there we go.
Okay. Now, hopefully, I'm not sure how large that looks like for the folk looking at the slides here, but I think there's a very interesting one. I'll just pull one out by example. Others. Under the Others tab, in the second column, you'll see 3 logos, top to bottom, and the bottom one being Deposify.
Yep.
To me, someone might say, well, that's not going to set the world alight. But I think what John Bale, and David Brennan, the founders of Deposify, realized was that there was something missing in the landlord-tenant relationship, and that was trust as to what happens when you pay your rental bond over to the landlord. So really, this is simply escrow as a service, but pointed to a financial service, that being in a broader definition, the protection or the escrowing of the bond. And that company has been bought once by private equity, and it's now been flipped again. The numbers behind the transaction, they have not been revealed, but it looks pretty significant. It was in the newspapers recently. I do know the 2 gentlemen involved in it, and I will, for full disclosure, let you know that many years ago I bought some shares in it at a very early stage when I was doing some work for them. But it was because of the recent media coverage I'm mentioning them, not because of my involvement. I think also, if I look at the payment side, I'm just conscious again. I think what we do with TransferMate, I think, is really, really interesting. That moving away, getting people out of the banking system and getting them to move payments. But payments, by itself, people don't find sexy or that interesting anymore. Although it does make the world move. If you look under FinOps at the very top, in the middle, so credit lending, payments, platforms, funding, trading, crypto, and FinOps, you'll see a business called Global Shares. Global Shares was acquired by JP Morgan for about $600 million US dollars, $630 million US dollars in the last 12 months. And again, Michael, it's not doing anything sexy. It's just doing something that was paper-based and just does it a lot better. And it provides, it's an employee share scheme service. So I think JP Morgan bought it not because they wanted to use it for employee share schemes, but actually to utilize it for the investment services business that they have. Because this service here would say, well, Peter Oakes is an employee, his shares are in the register, and he wants to sell his shares. How can we do that for him? How do we track his shares, his entitlements, his options? So it really solved quite an interesting problem. On the credit and lending side, we're seeing a growth in Ireland now in crowdfunding. So that's sort of fairly interesting. I particularly like the businesses in the savings and investment side because they're really helping people save and plan for their future. And that ability now through technology, even though we can't get our superannuation fund or pension funds for another 20, 30 years whenever we can retire, the ability now to see how your pension is performing, the ability to engage with your pension and make choices through an app, which is fantastic. Something like PensionBee, a very simple a very simple offering, but for a very complex thing called pensions. Regulatory technology. Look, if we jump into that, Michael, I won't be able to stop talking because being an ex-central banker, being an ex-regulator, I was a central banker in Ireland. I was an FSA regulator, as an Australian regulator. To me, regtech, I think, is really exciting because it helps those firms demonstrate compliance. It reduces the possibility of financial stability issues. It helps ingrain the ethos of fair and honest markets, and also it helps support the other mantle that regulators love, which is consumer protection. And I guess the fourth one, the reduction in financial crime. Not sure how that worked for you, Michael.
Great. Well, I think that was really good. I'm really happy you focused on Deposify because it's one that I do know about, and I agree with you. It's that kind of boring end of getting stuff done that's really good to look at. Really, just in closing, I might shift topics slightly if you don't mind. You mentioned that we needed to move, beyond lip service to ESG, and that we were perhaps underestimating the impact of ESG. Now, Ireland was an early mover in this space. There was a green bond that came out very early in the green bond, the sovereign green bond market, although not what Zien likes, which is a policy performance bond as issued by Chile and just in October, Uruguay. But leaving those little cavils to one side, Sustainable Finance Ireland seems to have gone dead. Its website sort of limps along talking about things happening in 2021. What's really going on the scene there?
Yeah, well, actually, I think that's a good observation. What I'm wondering is whether there's been a change of name on the initiative, and the sites haven't been updated because one of the sites the government was involved in, I did point out that the Twitter handle was wrong, and I pointed that out because I was actually one of their events. They ran a great event here in Dublin, had rafters full. Was it IMCO? No, Calsters, the CEO of Calsters, one of the world's largest pension funds out of California, the public retirement scheme there, was speaking at it on ESG. And look, certainly the appetite to do more in ESG in Ireland is there. The headcount in the room was tremendous. The names of the global firms in the room were tremendous. I think the next step, or which really is an important step, is how do we in Ireland position, first of all, the important need to embrace ESG. And I'm not even sure ESG is the right word anymore, the right abbreviation, because it's being driven now a lot by regulation. I'm on the board, as I mentioned, of a number of companies. We discuss ESG at every board meeting, and it's not because we want to be good corporate citizens, but it's also because the number of EU regulations coming down, including new ones, which are going to impact our financial statements and the way we report. I think, not being part of the initiatives on ESG in Ireland, I'll be a little bit careful in saying that they have got to be quiet, because from what I've seen, it is there. It may be just that their voice isn't being heard, or they're not raising it sufficiently enough, or maybe it's because it's sort of being led to the government to drive it. I mean, one of the big things I see different between Ireland and the UK, just generally speaking, is that there's a lot more private initiatives driving public issues. In Ireland, we tend to have the government driving the public issues more than the private bodies, and then the private bodies get a seat at the table, and then they begin to do a lot more, right? So, look, Michael, I guess it's a case of watch this space. The reason I say it's a challenge and an opportunity is, one, it's a challenge because simply being able to put those things into practice and what our long-term goals are going to be. And the second thing is from the reporting and accounting standards about making sure you report these things in a fair way. But of course, as soon as they go into a report, you know what, the auditor is going to ask you, well, what are your ESG initiatives, and can we track back into them to make sure that what you're showing in the financial statements has merit?
Well, look, it's been absolutely super having you on, Peter. If I may, 3 quick rounds of thanks. Firstly, to our sponsors. These international connections across technology, economics, and finance are, I think, increasingly important, as well as we're definitely competing in a global world here. So things like Deposify will be immediately picked up and seen in other jurisdictions. And I think that's the importance of these types of connections. It's very, very clear that here in the UK, we've seen a great renewed interest in sorting things out across Europe. But in particular, the Irish have reached out to Britain, putting some very senior diplomats in place on building these relationships. And there's certainly a lot the two countries have done over many centuries and can do over coming centuries, despite the little kerfuffles that arise from time to time. But if I may, just turn to the audience. Thank you for your comments and questions. May I, as well as thank you for participating as ever, please do check out the website. Anybody in town today, you can register still if you wish. There are a couple spots left at the Busan event just by bank. You can see that there. But more importantly, tomorrow we'll be having employee share schemes looking at leveling up and social mobility. That will be absolutely fascinating. And as I say, the rest is very much on the website. But really, my thanks to you, Peter. You've been so open and kind over the years. You've really pulled together your community, but you haven't done it in an insular way, if I can use that that adjective, insular. But you've done it in a way that has really connected Ireland with the world and with the UK, and for that we appreciate it. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.